Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the show, Detroit City Council President Mary Sheffield comes from a long line of Detroit activists.
She says she's ready to carry that legacy into the mayor's office with policies focused on housing equity, economic fairness, and community safety.
We'll sit down with her to find out how she plans to implement her vision for Detroit.
Plus, Black power mobilized generations, but decades later, racial economic gaps remain stubbornly wide.
Could changing how we measure progress finally spark meaningful change?
Also, we'll discuss the African World Festival happening this weekend and how it reflects the many textures of the diaspora.
But first, elections are about people running for office. And each election cycle poses the questions: who are the candidates and what do they represent? But elections are also about issues. They give us an opportunity to reflect on the problems impacting a lot of people. Housing has been a big issue in Detroit. According to recent University of Michigan surveys, housing affordability is a top priority for residents. And in the majority renter city that is Detroit, 60% of those renters are cost burden. That means they spend over 30% of their income on housing costs. A lack of affordable housing is related to homelessness. According to a 2024 point-in-time count, homelessness increased by about 240 people. That was a 16% increase from the previous year. So what are the drivers of this problem? And what can be done to prevent people from experiencing homelessness altogether? To discuss this, we have two guests with us. Ted Phillips is the executive director for the United Community Housing Coalition, where he protects people from eviction. Ted, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
Also with us is Nushrat Rahman, the economic mobility reporter for the Detroit Free Press and BridgeDetroit. Her reporting on homelessness has really helped us to understand the problem. Nushrat, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you.
So, Nushrat, I want to start with you. According to a point-in-time count by the city and a nonprofit, homelessness is going up, as we mentioned. What do you know about why that's happening?
Right. Thank you for that question. Well, first of all, you're right. Homelessness, according to the data that we do have, increased from 16% from 2023 to 2024. And the main caveat to that is that this is from something called the point-in-time count, which is a one-night count of people experiencing homelessness in the city of Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park. And that's typically done in January. And the caveat is essentially that it's likely an undercount according to, any expert that you talk to, because it's really the homelessness that we can see out on the streets, in the shelters, and we know that homelessness is not always visible. So from that data, that limited data that we do have, we do see that there has been an increase in homelessness in and around the city of Detroit. One thing that I will point out is that from 2023 to 2024, children faced the largest increase in homelessness, not just locally, but also across the country. So if we look at the data across the United States from this one night count, we see that increase as well. And what's more, the number of children experiencing homelessness last year, both sheltered and unsheltered, reached the greatest number in a decade. And that's according to a Free Press analysis that one of my colleagues did. And so it's pretty startling, the fact that, we see that homelessness has been increasing, but more so that the number of children and women experiencing homelessness has also seen a rise as well.
Yeah, this is really concerning. And I wonder, when it comes to your reporting, what does this say about our ability as a nation, as a state, as a city, to address poverty?
Well, I'll take it back to the moms I talked to, right, who are experiencing housing instability. The main driver that women who are, living in the shelters, the main thing that they'll say is that it's housing, right? It's a lack of affordable and accessible housing. And it's not even just women and families who are living in the shelters temporarily or for a longer period of time. It's women and children who have housing choice vouchers, right? Those subsidies that may be at risk. So the main driver and the reason why a lot of families will say that they're experiencing homelessness and housing instability is not being able to find a home that they can afford in the city of Detroit.
And I mean, we know Detroit has a lot of homes, but many of those homes are blighted or in poor condition. I wonder what you can say about the lived experience of people experiencing homelessness. How many of those people are literally on the street, and how many of them have a shelter, maybe though it's shelter that's unstable or unsafe? I mean, I'm thinking back to that point in time count happening in January. So anyone who doesn't have to be on the street, who can find any sort of shelter is going to do so during that time in Michigan in the winter.
Right. So when we think of homelessness, it's not a monolith. It could be, the person who is, on the street, literally for various reasons. Maybe they're not comfortable in a shelter. Maybe they just prefer being outside. So that's, I think, often the image that comes to people's minds, but that's not always the case. Homelessness can be someone who's couch surfing. It can be like a 16, 17, 18-year-old who's bouncing from couch to couch. It can be it can be a person that's staying with family, right? That's housing insecurity. That's homelessness. So that's something that I think often we don't think about, but that does fall under the broader umbrella of housing insecurity. If we do look at the point in time data, unsheltered homelessness, so literally out on the streets, that makes up a fraction of the broader scale of homelessness across the city. I mean, I think what that really shows us is that there, again, it's not one type of housing insecurity and instability that we see across the city of Detroit. It can really vary. And I think I would just mention really briefly the example of the two children who passed away earlier this year who were experiencing homelessness with their family. I mean, this was a family who, from what we know, were living in their car. And so we have families like that as well. They may not be in the shelters. They may not have been able to get in the shelters, for example, but they were living in their car in a parking garage. And we have examples like that across the city.
Nushrat, thank you for mentioning that. We are going to get into that tragedy and how it thrust the idea of homelessness and housing insecurity into the public consciousness and what's happening now. This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about the issues of housing affordability and homelessness in Detroit ahead of the mayoral election. Our guests are reporter Nushrat Rahman and Ted Phillips of the United Community Housing Coalition. Ted, I want to turn to you. Homelessness is up, as we've been discussing, but evictions are down. They went from 30,000 to 20,000 over the last couple of years, which is a real notable decrease. Could you talk about what the key reasons are for that decline?
Yeah, those are numbers of filings, not actual evictions, but typically about 25% of those do end up having orders signed to be evicted by bailiffs. Unfortunately, the 36th District Court doesn't track that very well, so we don't know how many actually were evicted and how many moved just before the bailiff. Same results very often in terms of being forced into homelessness. But certainly in terms of the good news is that prior to COVID, there were annually 30,000 cases a year being filed. During COVID, the moratoriums and what have you, that was kind of a apples to oranges comparison, but now we're back. And Detroit still has one of the highest rates in the country, but we have been at 20,000 and declining a little bit since 23. And we're on pace this year so far. I just checked this the other day through July 15th to actually be a little bit under 20,000 this year. That's nothing to celebrate greatly, right, because that is still way too many people, but it is a good start. I think one of the factors, the biggest major factor that's happened since that time has been the right to counsel in the city of Detroit. Now, there's also been some other rule changes and what have you coming out of the COVID crisis that have certainly helped to protect tenants' rights a little bit more, requiring rights of advice of rights to be given by the judges and what have you, stuff like that. But having attorneys there, pre-COVID, about 4% of all of the cases filed was all that had attorneys. I'm going to compare at least a little bit apples to oranges here, but I don't have the exact data on the other. But right now, we're at the point where it's a little over 50% of the eligible, and eligible in Detroit is to be at 200% or less of poverty, which is overwhelmingly the majority of tenants going to 36th District Court. But right now, a little over 50% are being represented in court, and another 10% getting at least legal advice, oral advice. So a lot of changes there that have happened, and I think that's made a big impact as well. But the affordability problem is still a problem because there has to be more than just attorneys. Getting more time and getting payment plans and getting other things like that, there has to be other support for tenants. We've noted, I think, Nushrat mentioned as well, that Section 8 even is a problem because, I mean, we've seen recently a number of people that are not able to use their Section 8 vouchers timely because they can't find housing. They can't find housing at $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a month for their families, and that's a new thing.
You're echoing what we hear from eviction defense attorneys and housing advocates and reporters like Nushrat, which is that this is a housing supply issue, that we don't have enough affordable housing. What more can the city do when it comes to building affordable housing, to lowering the eviction rates further? What does it need to do in your eyes?
Well, we need more housing, but we need to stop losing housing too. I mean, we've went through I've been practicing in 36th District Court since 1984, and we've gone through a whole series of housing losses, not enforcing our code enforcement for rental housing and the like, massive demolition costs over the years. So yes, we have a shortage of housing, of decent and affordable housing. But I'm not sure that we're still yet to the point where we're doing much to preserve what we do have. And I would hope that more could be done there. Now, I know the city is going through some changes in its code enforcement, relaxing it a little bit. Maybe that's a good thing, making it a little easier to comply for landlords and to register. But one of the first things I had in 1986 when I came in as director of the Housing Coalition was a meeting with, I don't know if she's council president then, but Mary Ann Mahaffey on city council, and Creighton Letter at Building and Safety. And one of the issues was getting code violations taken care of. There was about a 10% registration rate then. Today, there's about a 10 to 12% compliance rate and about a 25% registration rate. So it is wildly ignored. Hopefully that can change, and that certainly has to be one thing. There also, of course, needs to be more money put into housing. It would be good if there was money available for landlords who really are trying to be able to maintain their homes. I think from experience that is mostly local landlords. We have seen a lot of I wouldn't even call it investment when entities from outside the state, the country, the whatever, want to buy property in Detroit, rent it out, never provide any repairs to it, run it down until it's demolished, and then move on to the next house. That's not investment. But certainly we do have some, in-house landlords here in Detroit that it would be good if they could get some support to be able to maintain the properties and some other building of properties that would be affordable. The building part may be very difficult. Getting more Section 8 vouchers is likely going to be incredibly difficult over the next 3.5 years or so. But we have to do everything we can to do that. Related to this, sort of, is that, and it's a much smaller pot, but there's a number of low-income people that have land contracts. And if there were some support for them to be able to become homeowners for a very small investment there, we could, and we've been engaged in this for a few years now, trying to bail land contract buyers out for $10,000, $15,000 loans, not grants, but loans that are paid back and then are able to be used to help others. Things like that. I think we need to be more creative in terms of how we look at this. We can't build our way out of it. exclusively. We can't just lawyer our way out of it exclusively. We can't just pay rents for everybody exclusively, but some combination of a lot of those kinds of things is what needs to be done.
In a moment, we're going to talk about which candidates are speaking creatively about this. We're discussing the issues of housing affordability and homelessness in Detroit ahead of the mayoral election. Our guests are Ted Phillips of the United Community Housing Coalition and reporter Nushrat Rahman. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. This is the Metro on WDET. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about housing affordability and homelessness in Detroit ahead of the mayoral election. Our guests are Ted Phillips of the United Community Housing Coalition and reporter Nushrat Rahman. And Nushrat, I want to turn to you. I'm going to play a clip of City Council President and mayoral candidate Mary Sheffield. This is back in February when she spoke with WDET's Russ McNamara.
I also think we have to continue to address affordable housing. Oftentimes people say we're not in a housing crisis. It's a state of emergency. And we just recently saw what happened with a family of 5, Miss Williams, who lost 2 of her children because she was sleeping in a car for 3 months. And so while we're having the influx of development and economic activity that is happening, we still have to be controversial issues like quality housing in Detroit. The least of the most vulnerable in our community is protected, uplifted, and supported.
Again, that was City Council President and mayoral candidate Mary Sheffield. She'll be joining us later this hour. And she was speaking about housing and homelessness when the matter was really thrust into public consciousness after the tragedy she mentioned. And it's one, Nushrat, that you mentioned earlier as well. Now, you cover housing and homelessness. Do you feel like the candidates have proposed meaningful solutions to the housing affordability problem, or has the issue lost center stage?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think I'll answer that based on what I've seen has been reported out so far and from the candidates' own platforms. From what I've noticed, many of the candidates do highlight affordable housing as part of their vision. For example, Solomon Kinlock, who is one of the candidates, highlights adding 10,000 new units of affordable housing or affordable units rather, and he's expressed support for down payment assistance. Council President Sheffield has also expressed an interest in affordable housing, and so have the other candidates as well. One of the other themes that I noticed is pretty consistent across the board, across the candidates, is a need to lower property taxes and provide some type of property tax relief. So in some form, the candidates do express the need for affordable housing. It is one of the pillars, but at least from what I've seen, I haven't seen a depth of what the policy of how we get that affordable housing on the ground actually looks like. I think, I was looking at Councilmember Fred Durhal's platform, and he kind of lays out how he would do that. So he said he supported the fast track pilot program, which is essentially a program that council members approved last year that would offer property tax cuts to developers based on rent prices. And so he said he would expand that as a tool to ramp up affordable housing, whereas someone like Kinlock said that he would build 10,000 new units of affordable housing. Someone like Durhal had said that he would build an estimated 1,400 new affordable housing in Detroit every year and create more pathways to home ownership. So I think my natural inclination as a reporter, especially someone who's covered housing for the past 5 years, is okay, how are you going to do that, right? And so, yeah, my main question is you can have a big vision about, okay, I want more affordable housing. I want more Detroit homeowners. I want better rental conditions. But my main question is how are you going to do that? And so I think that's the main thing that I'm kind of looking for as someone who's been covering housing for a while is, what are the ways that you're going to go about doing that? What are the policy proposals? What are the tools, right? And I think there is going to be a discussion or a debate happening later today, which I'm not sure if you're going to highlight, but the mayoral candidates have been invited to talk about housing and homelessness. And so I'm eager to go to that and hear a little bit more about what the candidates have to say about actually, making these visions that they have a reality. One thing that I will mention that I haven't, at least from like what I've read about and been paying attention to is, I know that the candidates have talked about rental conditions, et cetera, but that's something that I think is really top of mind for a lot of Detroiters. We can say we want more affordable housing, but I think I'm glad that Ted brought up the conditions of the rentals so far. So the one way that I'll look at it is, not just rental conditions, but the conditions of homes. So a lot of the time seniors who are living in pretty, torn down houses will talk about the need for home repair. I think I've seen some of the candidates talk about that, but not to the scale of the issue, I guess you could say. And then the other side of that is the condition of the rentals across the city of Detroit. And I'll just use the example. Last week, city officials announced what they called the largest nuisance abatement lawsuit in the city. And it was against a landlord called Realty who had, they were alleging had really poor and terrible conditions. I mean, I went into one of the renters' homes and she didn't have running water last week. And so,
this is Nushrat. This too. Is a lawsuit against a blockchain real estate company. Yep. Is that what you're referring to?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm referring to. And I bring that up because rental conditions is such a pressing issue in the city of Detroit. And I've seen some of the candidates talking about it, but not to, like I said, the scale of the issue across the city of Detroit.
Ted, I want to bring you back into the conversation because this lawsuit does seem like a big deal. It is against, again, a blockchain real estate company that owns over 400 rental properties that are allegedly in terrible condition. From your legal perch, how big of a deal is this case?
Well, I think it's a big deal, particularly if this is a sign of where the city's going. I mean, there's landlords that own that many pieces of property that maybe aren't in that as bad a condition, but there certainly aren't registered, aren't in compliance, et cetera. So it's a big deal, and that these folks need to get assisted, and we need the legal work out there because if people like this, tenants like this, are making complaints, we need to make sure that they're not getting evicted for making those complaints. That would be illegal. But you got to raise it in court for that to be raised to the court. So I think it's a good start. I think it's hopefully there can be some good resolutions on this, and hopefully it's a sign of the city being a little more aggressive overall. The other thing, just to get back to one thing Nushrat said about affordability, that's a term that's thrown out a lot of times, but sometimes we need to be questioning. But what do you mean by affordability? A lot of times they're talking about low-income tax credits. I'm not sure where that's going with the new administration. I'm not sure it's under fire or not, but who knows. But a lot of times that's not very affordable for many Detroiters. So if you're finding housing that for people at 60% of the area median income, and I don't think we're requiring it to be Detroit area median income, I think it's the Tri-County area, You're really talking about middle-income Detroiters who need help too, sure. But you're not really getting to the people at 30 and 40% of AMI. And so it really is not affordable for that group. So there needs to be a multi-tiered strategy. That's part of it. Other part of it would be seeing how we can more effectively use, our Section 8 vouchers and stuff like that, and how we can save housing that's there, and how we can save homeowners. I mean, Detroit's done a pretty good job on the tax credit stuff. So another issue, though.
I want to think about some key players in all of this, which happen to be landlords. I want to play a clip of the Metro's Kerry Jr. II speaking with Detroit lawyer Conrad Mallett about landlords needing a certificate of compliance, but not necessarily having it.
You mentioned the certificate of compliance, right? The World Token does not have a certificate of compliance, right?
That's right, for any of its properties.
Okay, so don't real estate companies need that to get that from the city? How could that even be possible for them to own over 400 or so properties if they don't even have that?
You know how it works. You advertise a rental property, in many cases comes through word of mouth. These are going to be one-to-one transactions. Your friend says John Jones is renting the apartment that he has, renting the house that she owns. Jones. You go there. Sometimes you sign a lease, sometimes you don't. And then you're in the property, and the city of Detroit doesn't know anything about it. It's not an electronic process. It's not digitally driven. 60% of the people who live in the city of Detroit are renters. If there's 700,000 people, there's 360,000 people living in rental properties. It overwhelms the city in terms of how we're supposed to manage unless we have the goodwill of the landlords who want to keep their properties in compliance and therefore will voluntarily cooperate with the ordinance structure that we have in place. You can't enforce 100% compliance.
That was the city of Detroit's lawyer, Conrad Mallett. Ted, I wonder what you make of the city's perspective here that Detroit can't do much to enforce landlords to have a certificate of compliance. Do you think Detroit could do more to regulate that?
Well, I think they can do more. I think certainly when cases are brought to court, they should, and we want to continue to work with the city on this. There should be knowledge of which properties are landlord-tenant rental properties, et cetera. But I think right now the number's about 88% of the properties in Detroit that we suspect, I don't know anyone has an absolute number, but about 88% are not with a CFC. So it is a common thing, and I think there needs to be more there. The 36th District Court also needs to be more mindful of actually taking it serious as well. I've seen over the years many judges that, well, that's just a piece of paper, unless there's some showing of very serious violations, it's not going to be pushed. So there needs to be coordination between the court, the city, legal services community, and the landlords need to be cooperating. And the tenants need to know that if they raise issues that they're going to be protected. And I think that's always been a major problem. I'm not going to call the city and report this because then I'll be set out. So it needs to be a broad-based approach to dealing with this.
Ted Phillips, Executive Director of the United Community Housing Coalition, and Nushrat Rahman, reporter at the Detroit Free Press and Bridge Detroit. Thank you both so much for joining us today on the Metro.
Thank you for having us.
This is the Metro on WDET. Our annual listener survey is out now, and your responses inform the way we produce the Metro. So let us know how we're doing. Go to WDET.org/survey. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us.